in this case, let's say you wanted to make a title or you wanted to make um, objects move in an image. We can do that by using a layered Photoshop file, and I've already made a layered Photoshop file, and if you want to open it up, the one that I am opening up is the one that's called Brown Title. Brown Title. What that is. So open this up for just a moment. So I quickly made this right before class. Again, if you notice what we have here is we have so it's in that folder, March 13th folder, so brown title. And you'll notice over here is we have one base on one layer, another base on another layer. We have some text on a layer, and then we have a background on a layer. So one way that we could animate this and make it a little bit more interesting is that we can animate all these pieces together using either After Effects or Photoshop in this case. And it's something that I do all the time. Many of the things I've done in the past are all done with Photoshop layers. Let me show you a couple. Let me just show you one example. I don't know if it's, I might have to sign in. Hold on. So at the beginning of this video, you'll see there's a little title right here.
Hi, I'm Laura, and this is Zircon.
So as you can see, we have a background right here, right? And you'll notice that a text comes animating in, right? With some sound effects. And then this is a Photoshop cutout of a person, Laura in this case. And then you'll notice another person comes in like that. So something like this is very easily done with preparing ahead of time, making a Photoshop file. That's it. You make a Photoshop file that looks like this, then you either bring it into Premiere or After Effects and you can animate it. Either one. I think I did this in After Effects, but I could have easily done the exact same thing that we saw right here inside of Premiere. Okay, and that's what I'm going to demonstrate first. So, great, easy way to do things with your videos or have demonstrations of information by doing layered files in Photoshop. If we look at, again, if we look at this image inside of Photoshop, there's some challenges. And some of the challenges that the nice thing about using Photoshop for making titles is you can use all those effects that you have in Photoshop, right? We have a nice big glowy background here, which you can do in Premiere, but it's not very easy, it's not very good. Where in Photoshop, boom, we just throw a drop shadow on there, and boom, you got the black around the yellow text, right? Well, here's another problem, though, is bringing this into After Effects, bringing this into Premiere sometimes causes problems. And so, a lot of times if I'm going to do something like this inside of Photoshop, I would remove the text. Don't make it a text anymore, and make it a normal layer without, because right now Photoshop sees it as a text layer. See the T? So I'm going to squish it or render it so that it's seen as dots or pixels and not text. The quickest way I found to do that is, you can go and select the text layer, which I click on the text layer here. If you don't see that, I can click on the text layer, and if I go underneath type, I could say, or I meant layer, I could say rasterize. That'll turn that into an object. The problem is I still have the effect. And it's not necessarily the type that might be the problem with the other program. It might be the effect that I applied here. So another easier, quicker way that I found to do this inside of Photoshop is to make a new blank layer by clicking in the layer window, which makes a new blank layer, put it underneath my text layer, and then I merge the text layer down onto that blank layer by going in the layer window to merge down. And what that does is it merges the text down to a blank layer, and it no longer has the effect and text. It's seen as a normal layer. It took me many years to figure that out, how quick to do something like that. Now you don't have to do that right now. You can actually use that Photoshop file. I'm just saying if you do have problems going from, and sometimes specifically the effects won't come over to another program. So you might need to do this to get rid of the effect. That's the main problem. We could probably use, because the drop shadow is pretty basic, it probably works in Premiere, I'm not really sure. We can try and import it. So let's go and animate this. I mean, it's not as nice as Vic and Laura, but hey, we still got two things we can move and stuff. So other things to think about in Photoshop, of course, is size. Make sure you know what size you're going to make whenever you're working in Photoshop. Make sure you're working with the right dimensions. If I was going to bring this into Premiere, make sure you're working in the, again, the film and video sizes here inside of Photoshop under File, New is where you got your film and video sizes. I think we talked about those. Some of the things to keep in mind is the one that we're going to make towards the end of class today, the little movie that we're going to make, is in the old size. These are old sizes here. Okay, this is that's an old 720 by 480, which is NTSC DV. 15 years ago we were doing that. Of course, nowadays we have our 4K, right? 4K and film sizes. Okay, let's try animating this in Premiere. So I'm going to just hide Photoshop or quit Photoshop. I'm going to hide this. And first demonstration will be to animate that brown title in Premiere. To do that, I'm going to go and open Premiere up. And I'm going to start a new project. And I'm just going to give it a name. This is going to be Title Sample. And you can put it wherever you want. And then I'm going to say OK. So I'm going to open up a brand new blank Premiere project. And then I'm going to import that Photoshop file. Now, one of the things that they introduced to Photoshop CS2, I believe it was, when they came out with Premiere CS2, is they brought the ability to bring in a layered Photoshop file with the layers intact so you can animate them. Okay? So to do that inside of here, when you go under File, New, so again, in this, same thing's going to happen inside of After Effects. If you go under File, New, or not New, I'm sorry, File, Import, when you go under File, Import, when you choose that brown title, so go and find that brown title Photoshop file, and if you say import, it's going to ask you a question. Here's a question, because it's recognizing, hey, you're bringing in a layered Photoshop file. You're bringing in a layered Photoshop file. What do you want to do? Well, you have background, you have layer 3 as a thing, layer 4, and then you have a title, right? Okay? So it's asking you what you want to do. And what I want to do is I'm going to say not merge. Look at the options at the top up here. It says merge all layers. That'll squish everything down into one layer. I don't want to merge them all. What I want to do is I want to bring them in as a individual layers. Okay? We'll learn about sequence later for doing animation. But we're going to bring them in as individual layers. And then I'm going to hit OK. And it brings them all in. And if we look down below here, towards the bottom, you'll see that it brings them all in as separate layers. Okay, it brings them in all as separate layers. And what we can do is we can then take those layers and we can put them in the timeline. Let me just try this real quick. If I put them all in the timeline, yeah, now it puts them all right after each other. Let me try this again. Let me try bringing it in again. There used to be a ability to bring it in as a sequence. Which options was it? Sequence. Sequence. I should have said sequence. So, yeah. Actually, let's do that again. Let's bring it in as a sequence. It might be easier than having each individual layer. So I'm going to do that again. Why am I... Okay, whatever. I'm going to bring it in again by going under File, Import, and then this time, instead of saying individual layers, which I shouldn't have done, I should say sequence right here, sequence. And then hit OK. And what that does is, if you twirled on the triangle, you'll notice it'll actually make a sequence with all the layers already intact right here. See it right here? If you twirl down the triangle there and you open that up, you'll notice it brings all the images in together as and you'll notice they're all on top of each other, just the way you built it inside of Photoshop. And since they're all, again, they all layer up. Again, your brown backgrounds here. You have one mug, 2 mugs, and then the title. And then with using the motion effects inside of Premiere, you can animate these all individually. So to animate them, again, I'm going to use the effects controls. We've already looked at effects controls. So let me show you how I would animate. Now, by default, when you bring a still image in, it automatically scales it out for 5 seconds. 5 seconds is 150 frames. Okay, it automatically, and then you can scale them longer if you want. I'm going to scale them a little bit longer here, a little bit longer. So stretch them out a little bit longer. And then usually when I am animating something over time, I usually stair-step it. And so what do I mean by stair-stepping? Well, if you look at it, it's moments in time. So let's say the title is the last thing that's going to come in. The title's the last thing. So I'm going to kind of scale this over kind of like this. And then this one I'm going to kind of scale over like this. And then this one I'm going to scale over maybe just a little bit like that. So this is what I mean by stair-stepping. See how this looks like a stair going up, up, up? What that means is that there's no objects on the screen. Then boom, there's an object on the screen. And boom, there's an object on the screen. And boom, there's an object on the screen. Now we could simply fade these in very easily. I mean, we could really quickly just throw a dissolve in there, right? Do you remember doing the transition dissolve? I could simply, if I wanted just to not even animate these, if I wanted to make it a little bit more interesting, I could go to my effects window and I could simply quickly just put a dissolve in there at the very beginning of each one. Just put a dissolve. I do this all the time. You just put a dissolve at the beginning, and if you look at just by putting a stair-stepping them and then putting a dissolve in there, you can easily make something that looks like this. See how it fades in, fades in, fades in. So, look how quick we could do that. The key is, building it in Photoshop, bring it in as a sequence, double click on the sequence, stair-step the timing, and then put a dissolve at the beginning. But that's kind of boring. I mean, just dissolving. So I just wanted to point that out. I'm going to delete those dissolves here. Delete those dissolves. Okay, next, instead of dissolving them, we can animate them. If you remember from animating, I think we did some brief animation before. how you animate in both After Effects as well as in Premiere is you animate with keyframes. And keyframes are like little diamonds that you put along the path. And so to do that, I'm going to click on my first brown layer here. So I'm going to click on my first bottle here. And if you click on one of the layers that you have, if you open up the effects controls, you'll notice you have motion right here. Okay, inside of the motion, if I twirl that down, you'll see you have everything from position to scale to rotation to anchor point to anti-flicker filter and all these other options here. And so usually how I animate in either After Effects or Flash or even Photoshop or Premiere is I animate backwards. I know where I want it to end. This is where I want my bottle to end up. I don't know where I want it to start. So you'll notice this is the timing here. See the timing? This is timing here. So as I drag the playhead in the effects controls, it also drags it down here. So I'm going to kind of go a little bit down the timeline, and I'm going to go to where it says position, and I'm going to hit it. And then I'm going to go to scale. I'm going to click that. Then I'm going to go all the way back to the very beginning. I'm going to go all the way back. See the little blue playhead? I'm going to go all the way back to the beginning. And I'm going to hit this diamond here to add a new keyframe and add another keyframe. So I'm going to add 2 keyframes here at the very beginning plus 2 keyframes here. And so since they're added at the very beginning, what I can do is I can scale it down and I can adjust the position of it where I want. And so I can have this bottle or ceramics come flying in like this very easily by putting keyframes in 2 positions inside of After Effects or inside of Premiere here. So again, this could come in like that. And I could do the same thing with the other one. Maybe try something different. Maybe you want this second bottle instead of, and click on the second bottle. So maybe on the second bottle, you hit scale and rotation. Maybe you want it to be small and come zooming in and spinning as it's coming in. You can use rotation, again, hitting these little stopwatches here. Again, I know where I want it to end, so that's why I put these keyframes in here first. But then I go all the way to the beginning, and then I can adjust it. I can adjust the scale, real tiny, and then rotation maybe. I'm going to put, not rotating, I'm going to put how many times I want it to rotate, like 3 times. And then, is that 3 degrees? Oh, I guess it's 3 degrees. So what would be 360 and 360 be what if I wanted to rotate twice? 360 and 360? In After Effects, you can put how many times you want. 820? Is that 3? What's 720? Is that 360 and 360? 720. Let's put that in there. Oh, there it goes. 2 times. Now it says 2 times there. But if we look at it now, it should come flying in. And the rotation of it goes around the anchor point right here. See this anchor point? So if you want to adjust that anchor point so it rotates around the center of the object, because it's going around the center of the image. It's going around the center of the image. If you wanted to move the anchor point, that's this thing. If you move it to the center, it could rotate around that. And then, of course, you would have to adjust the position of it so that it is, there we go. So again, the anchor point is the center position. I did that by adjusting that. So you can get something like this very easily in your video. And the same thing with my title. I can go and animate that in. We can just either scale that or something like that, or hey, we just do a cross dissolve. How about that? If we can get it to come over here. There we go. So you can easily make titles like this. Again, using a combination of layered Photoshop files and layers inside of After Effects. Then you say, well, you know, this is all good and it's a nice, nice title. What if I wanted to put this at the beginning of a video? One of the things to keep in mind inside of Premiere is that you can mix and match sequences. So this could just be my sequence, my brown title sequence, and I can make a video and add this sequence to the other sequence. So you can actually have multiple sequences together in the timeline. So this takes some time to get used to how to do these effects here. But if you learn to master, yeah.
Mine doesn't have any keyframes. I can't figure out where they are.
The diamonds that you see here inside of Premiere are the same diamonds you see in After Effects. Sometimes people describe After Effects as Photoshop with motion. Okay, so Photoshop with motion. And so one thing I don't do is usually make titles in Photoshop and then bring them into After Effects. I usually make the titles directly in After Effects because you can do things in After Effects with text that you can't do in Photoshop. So actually let me stop this video right here.